Lesson 8-4, Bar Graphs and Histograms. A bar graph is a method of comparing data by using solid bars to represent quantities. So the step 1 for drawing a bar graph is to draw a horizontal line as your horizontal axis and a vertical line as your vertical axis. You want to label each axis, identifying what those axes represent. From there, you need to choose a scale on each axis to include all the scores. So sometimes you count by 5, sometimes you count by 2, sometimes you may need to count by 1s, but you want to make sure that your scale includes all the scores. And then you want to always title your graph. The title of your graph does not need to be a long sentence. It may just be a few words, but it needs to describe what the graph is representing. And then for step 2, you draw a bar to represent each category of the graph. Let's look at this set of data. We're going to create a bar graph to represent the set of data. So I first want to make my horizontal line and my vertical line. I'm going to put the team names at the bottom and the score along the side. I'm going to label the bottom just with the initials of the team, so SF, D, TB, C, and W. And then up the side, you have 0 at the bottom, but I'm going to actually start my graph at 40 and go to 60. So I'm going to have 40, 41, 42, 45, 46, 47, 49, 51, 52, 53, 54, and we'll just stop at 55 since that's kind of our last number. So San Francisco had a score of 55, so we make our bar graph. Dallas had a score of 52, so we can make our bar graph for that one. Tampa Bay had a score of 48. Chicago had a score of 46. And Washington had a score of 42. So then you could title this graph as Team Scores. So this graph demonstrates the scores of specific teams within a certain area. Next, we're going to look at displaying data in a histogram. So with a histogram, you kind of go the same way. You draw and label a horizontal and a vertical axis, and you add a title. But then for a histogram, you draw a bar to represent the frequency of each interval. So not necessarily the amount, but the frequency of each interval. So let's look at this example here. We're going to draw our axis. Across the bottom would be the magnitude, and across the side would be the frequency. And this would be we would title this largest earthquakes. So as you can see, there's kind of a range of numbers here for the magnitude versus just regular numbers. So at the bottom, we need to include that range. So 7.0 to 7.4, 7.5 to 7.9, 8.0 to 8.4, 8.5 to 8.9, and 9.0 to 9.4. And then up the side, you can include your frequencies. Again, we'll probably just count by 1s because we want to make sure that we're including each one of the numbers. My graph's kind of bleeding into my title, but that's okay. So then for 7.0, it goes up to 4. For 7.5 to 7.9, it goes all the way up to 14. For 8.0 to 8.4, it goes up to 5. For 8.5 to 8.9, it is at 2. And for 9.0 to 9.4, it is at 1. So you can see the difference between the histogram kind of showing the frequency of data versus a bar graph that shows the individual numbers that represent each category. We can also use graphs to interpret or to get information. So looking at the graph to the right, you might have a question that says, how many moles are represented by this graph? To figure that out, you need to see how many moles are represented by each value. So for the first value, you would have 10 because it goes up to 10. The second value would be 14. The third would be 4. And then you would have 2 ones. So you could add all those together, and that would give you 30, and that would be how many moles are represented in this graph. Now you could also figure out what percent of the mall had more than 274 stores, because you know that there's a total of 30, so then you could figure out how many had more than 274. So there was 4 here, 1 here, and 1 here, so that is 6 out of 30, and then if you turn that into a percent, you get 20%. So when you're interpreting data or answering questions, you just want to refer to the graph and see what they're asking, and just pay attention to whether they're asking for the frequency of the number or if they're actually asking for the value of the number. There will not be a lesson review for this lesson. Please make sure you do some extra practice problems to get some practice.